Alright, hello everyone. Today we are here with my new car, Peugeot 508. And it's not just a 508, it's a 508 station. And it's not just a 508 station, it's a 508 station turbo diesel. And it's not just a 508 station turbo diesel. It's a manual transmission one, and it's the only one in Israel, and it's very special, and I'm very excited to start working on the car. So today what we are going to do is fix everything that is wrong with the car, starting with new timing belt, oil filter, fuel filter, new coolant, new water pump, and new oil. Also, I will replace the serpentine belt, and I guess some surprises will be as I work on the car, but I just want to show you the INA kit. I don't know if it can transfer. Well, that thing happened as well. I don't know if I can transfer the feeling through the screen, but those products feels very solid and very high quality, and I just want to start working on the car, so let's get started.
In the first step, I lifted the vehicle as in many other jobs. I removed the wheel on the passenger side. I removed the side arch, which is attached with some Torx bolts. This frees up space and access to the pulleys area, which is going to be my best friend for the next few hours. I lifted the vehicle a little more to remove the lower cover, which is attached with several 10mm head bolts. And I lowered the car a bit. I started free some space from the top of the engine compartment, disconnected the battery, and removed the air filter box.
Ooh la la!
I removed the starter motor, which is attached with 3 Allen 8 bolts. Removing the starter motor gave me access to the flywheel. We will soon see why. I opened the cap of the expansion tank so that the coolant will drain easily through the bottom hose. While the coolant is draining, using a 15mm wrench, I released the existing drive belt by loosening the tensioner. At this point you can see that there isn't too much room to work, and the 2-liter engine creates quite a tight workspace. Well, we will have to live with it. After the coolant system was completely drained, I reconnected the lower radiator hose, and before removing the engine mount, I placed a jack stand and a wooden block under the engine to support it. For a more convenient access, I removed the feed hose of the fuel filter. This step will be necessary later anyway when I replace the filter. I removed the bolt that holds the expansion tank using a 10mm socket and disconnected the 2 hoses attached to it. I removed a few more bolts with a 15mm head and Torx bolt that hold the engine mount in place. First, the top mount comes off. Okay. This will need a replacement. And after removing a couple more Torx bolts, I could remove the second bracket that supported the engine as well. This is so narrow, I can only put a finger between the engine and the bracket. The upper timing belt cover comes apart with a few bolts with 10mm heads, and the tricky part is not removing the bolts, which requires all kinds of different tools or extensions, but disconnecting the clips of the harness that is connected to the cover. There is really no access to see the clips, and you have to work with a lot of patience until it works. Okay, so we have the 3 10mm bolts, another 10mm nut, and we have the wiring harness that is attached with this first clip, and then we have 2 clips from another type that it's like a mushroom. And we have to, it was hard to film it in video, but you take a clip extractor tool and just pull it out, and that's it. And now I could remove the top cover. I saw the condition of the belt even before I completely removed it, and you can see that it is about time. Before removing the bottom cover, I pulled off the crank pulley rubber cover so I could rotate the engine to the desired timing marks. The axis is tight, but there is a hole in the cam pulley that needs to be aligned with a hole on top of the engine. Then lock the camshaft in place using an 8mm locking pin. My method is this. While a friend rotated the engine carefully and slowly, I tried to insert the locking pin into the hole until it got in. Remember the flywheel? So it also needs to be locked in place using an 8mm hole that was hidden behind the starter that I removed earlier. I removed the crank bolt using impact. There is no other way to remove it since it needs the impact quick torque to be released. The crank bolt comes with Loctite. According to the book, it must be replaced. I played with the engine height and created enough room to pull the crank pulley out. And in addition, there is also the magnetic ring of the crank sensor. I pulled it out carefully so as not to damage the magnet. We will return to it later. We now got access to a few more 10mm head bolts that holds the bottom cover, and their removal resulted in the removal of the lower cover itself. Now that the belt is exposed, I cleaned the crank bolt from the Loctite residue using brake cleaner. From the top, I loosened the tensioner 13mm lock nut, and by using an Allen key I could loosen the tensioner and take the pressure off the belt to remove it from the pulleys. The removal of the tensioner was not that simple. As I said, the workspace is tight. I can assume that this vehicle was not designed to be with air compressor at start. And if it is, then, well, I don't want to curse on this video. Let's try with the jack. I removed the old idler pulley. Its bolt is a bit hidden, but with a 60mm socket, it has just enough place to come out. And as always, I like to compare old versus new. As I said at the beginning of the video, the new one in this case feels of the highest quality. A few more bolts holding the water pump in place. I assembled the new water pump, and believe me, it was very difficult to get everything in place with such a terrible access. But I tried as much as I could to tighten the bolts to specs, which is 50 Nm. And it was also the turn of the new idler pulley to meet the engine, his new home. And after I assembled the new tensioner, the only way to work with it is with a mirror. Otherwise you can't see the marking. It is quite hard to show you what I did there, so I put the instruction on the screen. Now I put the new timing belt, making sure that the text is pointing with the direction of the engine rotation clockwise.
Okay, sorry, but I couldn't show you what I did right now, so I will show you now because it's very tight in here and I couldn't fit a camera and a mirror and my tools. So what I did is open the central nut, and then with Allen key I adjusted the tensioner, and then let me find it, just a second. Okay, you see that little arrow that's pointing, okay, right now you see that little arrow, and it is exactly in the middle between those two marking points. That's where it should be, and then you tighten the central nut, and the belt is tensioned at the right specs. And as I showed you earlier, the floating the floating sprocket. Now check it out. It's the tooth is exactly in the middle where it's supposed to be. Peugeot have a special tools that lock it in place while you tension it, but you just need to spin it all the way to anti-clockwise, so the tooth is close to that edge, and then when you tension the belt, it slides just a little bit and go in the middle of this hole. And now we know that the timing is correct.
I reassembled the lower timing cover, the magnetic ring, and the crank pulley. The crank pulley also has some free play, so you have to rotate it between its two ends and find the middle points and place it at that point. And of course, finally, I installed the new crank bolt with Loctite applied to it already. And I rotated the engine 6 revolutions in total to make sure that the marking remained as they were. Let me tell you the truth, this part was not easy because the tensioner is not yet at maximum tension. So every 2 revolutions I had to slightly correct the gap between the crankshaft and the camshaft, until I could finally insert the locks after 6 full turns. The arrow of the tensioner is between the 2 marking points and it tells me that I can tighten the nuts all the way. I assembled everything that left, the rubber cover of the crank pulley, the timing cover and its wiring harness. From here I continued to replace the fuel filter. This requires the removal of several Torx bolts, 2 diesel hoses, one of which was already removed at the beginning of the work, and 1 connector. I applied some force using flathead screwdrivers and pulled the filter housing out and replaced the old one with the new one, including replacing the O-ring that comes with the new filter. I tightened the Torx bolts, I put back the fuel hoses and the connector, and primed diesel with the hand pump while the air bleed screw was open. This is necessary to create pressure in the system without having air bubbles in it. And I tightened the bleeding screw back. A new drive belt was also assembled in the reverse order of removing the previous belt. But to lift the engine, I also had to put back the engine mount. I cleaned the expansion tank and put it back in place as well and filled the cooling system with fresh original PSA coolant. From here, I continued to replace the oil filter and the engine oil. The oil filter is located in a very bad location where it can only be accessed with a 27mm open wrench. And that also takes some time. I lifted the car up and drained the oil from the pan, and then I put the drain plug back with a new washer. I went back to the oil filter that was released earlier and replaced it with a new filter as well. And of course, I also replaced the O-ring of the filter housing with the new O-ring that came with the filter. And I tightened the filter housing until it felt like specs, about 25 Nm. I added engine oil with a viscosity of 5W30 from Total, which is PSA recommended oil. Bon appétit! And although there is a sensor in the car that checks and tells you the oil level, of course I check the level manually with the dipstick.
Okay, so everything is back together. We got the new coolant, new oil, a new filter. Oh, I forgot those things. I connected all the hoses, all the electrical, the air filter, the battery. And now for the moment of truth. Let's see if she starts. Wow.
It's always a huge relief to finish such a complex job with a working engine. Let's continue to bleed the air from the coolant system. There are 2 bleeders here. One on the upper radiator hose. Open the cap and wait for coolant to come out of there. We can see that as soon as we open the cap, the coolant level drops because it pushes air out of the system. The second bleeding point is on the inlet pipe to the heating core. I like to let the engine idle for at least 10 minutes and look for leaks around the areas I worked on. And everything looks fine. The coolant level is maintained, so I close the expansion tank cap and put the last parts back in place. The wheel arch and the wheel. The memory card went to the other side at this point, so instead of showing you the actual work of this part, I'm showing you the removal part in reverse. I got some good ideas sometimes. This working day is over, but more work is about to come. Just before we continue with the video, I want to say that it takes me a lot of time to prepare these videos. I'm the editor, director, cameraman, writer, water girl, and narrator. If you are already watching, click the subscribe button. It will help me a lot. What will help me the most is sharing, liking, or commenting on the video and watching other videos on the channel. I appreciate it very much. So let's continue. When the first package arrived, I kept going with what is left. Let's start with the cabin filter. To get to the cabin filter, the work is a bit more complex than the standard Japanese car, but not too complicated. Two trim pieces under the steering wheel, they come out by pulling out or turning a locking clip. And then there is this lower side trim that is held by a Torx 20 screw. After removing it, there is access to the cabin filter housing. Unfortunately, the access is not the most comfortable, and the insulating fabric around the housing doesn't leave too much space to work either. But remove the plastic cover, take out the old filter which has seen better days, turn on the blower at maximum speed to remove any leaves and dirt from the system, and put in a new filter. Close the airbox in the reverse order. Before putting back the trim that covered the area, make sure that the box cover sits well and no air escapes from it. If it does, it will reduce the intensity of the ventilation in the passenger compartment. I went on to change the air filter. In this case, I'm using Bosch's filter. It is a very simple job here as well. We have 4 Torx 20 screws that attach the two parts of the airbox. Take out the old filter, put the new one, and tighten everything back together. The next thing I did was the replacement of the driver's side fog lamp, which used as both a turn signal light and a cornering light. The lamp got flooded with water a long time ago, and within half an hour I also replaced it with a new lamp. The work required a small lifting of the vehicle with a jack and a jack stand, removing the wheel arch as in the previous job, and removing the old light, which is attached with several Torx bolts. The more convenient approach is from below, so I removed the little plastic cover from down beneath. After assembling the new fog lamp, you can see that everything is working properly. The driver's mirror also needed attention since its cover was broken. I bought a mirror from a junkyard and asked them to paint it in the color of the car. Unfortunately, the mirror did not match my exact mirror function, which include both automatic folding and an LED at the bottom of the mirror. That's why I only replaced the cover itself. Instead of throwing away the mirror or leaving it for later, I removed the mirror direction motor and moved it to the right mirror, which also saw better days, and its motor was broken, so that the glass vibrated on high speeds. To replace the mirror, I removed the door trim, took out the old mirror and its wiring harness, and assembled a new mirror in the reverse order. The third brake light, which is an LED, was weak, and at the cost of a few bucks, was replaced with a new light. The work to replace it does not require any tools. All you have to do is remove the cover inside the trunk door, loosen the 2 butterfly nuts that hold the light in place, pull the connector out, and also disconnect the rear washer hose, and assemble the new light in the reverse order. And here you have a new working brake light. And it's also splashing windshield washer fluid. I'm ending the video with the first thing I fixed in the car, the cup holder. The cup holder was stuck in a half open position and did not want to close. This was compared to the cup holder on the driver's side. The removal of the cup holder tray using 2 Torx 20s revealed to me that the mechanism and the problem. It was just a small plastic chip that broke, but this small chip controls the opening and closing of the gears that release or lock the cup holder in place. I took a household electrical cord, cut its hard inner wire exactly to the length of the broken chip, sanded it, and then, using heat, glued it to the point where the plastic chip was. I gave it more strength with glue and Q-bond powder. I made sure everything was working properly. I finally put it all back together, and voila! We have a proper cup holder. That's it for today. Let me know if you'd like a more extensive guide on any of the work done here today. And tell me your thoughts on fixes I did to an 11-year-old used car. Bye!